Some murder mysteries are tragic, some are terrifying. But the one you're about to hear is both, and something more. It's a story of a woman whose ordinary life was invaded by an unseen predator, a voice on the phone, a watcher in the shadows. This is the story of Dorothy Jane Scott, a single mother from Anaheim, California, who vanished into the night in 1980, leaving behind a trail of fear, confusion, and chilling unanswered questions. Dorothy wasn't involved in a dangerous lifestyle. She didn't have enemies, but someone she may have known was watching her, calling her, threatening her. For months, her life was haunted by sinister phone calls, and then one night she disappeared. Let's unravel the haunting, unsolved case of Dorothy Jane Scott, a real-life horror story of obsession, mystery, and terror. Dorothy Jane Scott was born in 1948. At 32 years old, she lived a quiet life in Stanton, California, with her 4-year-old son, Sean. They lived with her parents, Jacob and Vera Scott. Dorothy worked as a secretary at a store that sold psychedelic items. Think lava lamps, incense, and novelty trinkets. But despite the shop's counterculture appeal, Dorothy herself was a conservative Christian woman. She didn't drink, didn't smoke, and rarely dated. She preferred staying at home and spending time with her son. Everyone who knew Dorothy described her as kind, helpful, and soft-spoken. She was dedicated to her job, her family, and her church. She wasn't the type of person anyone would expect to become the target of a violent crime. But behind the scenes, something deeply disturbing was unfolding. Several months before Dorothy vanished, she began receiving anonymous phone calls at home and at work. The voice on the other end belonged to a man. Sometimes he sounded gentle, professing love and admiration. Other times he was enraged, threatening her life in terrifying detail. He described what she was wearing, where she had been, what she had done that day. He left her gifts, dead roses on the windshield of her car. He said he was watching her. He always seemed to know where she was and when. Dorothy told her family about the calls. She even mentioned that she thought she knew who the caller was, but she never revealed a name. Maybe she didn't want to worry them further. Maybe she feared what would happen if she told. Despite the fear, Dorothy didn't change her routine. She continued working, attending church, and caring for her son. But the calls continued, each one dripping with obsession. It was May 28, 1980. That day, Dorothy attended a staff meeting at work. During the meeting, she noticed that one of her coworkers, Conrad Bostrom, didn't look well. His arm was swollen and red. Dorothy and another employee, Pam Head, offered to take him to the hospital. They stopped by Dorothy's house so she could check on her son and change clothes. At around 9 p.m., they arrived at UC Irvine Medical Center. Dorothy waited with Pam while Conrad received treatment for what turned out to be a spider bite. Everything seemed normal. At around 11 p.m., Conrad was discharged. Dorothy told Pam she would pull her car around to the front so they wouldn't have to walk through the parking lot. Pam and Conrad waited outside. Minutes passed. Then, Dorothy's car sped past them, headlights blinding, tires squealing. It didn't stop. It turned sharply out of the parking lot and vanished. At first, Pam and Conrad thought something had come up, maybe an emergency. But when Dorothy didn't return, panic set in. By morning, Dorothy was still missing. At 4:30 a.m., police found her white Toyota station wagon burning in an alley about 10 miles from the hospital. The car was completely engulfed in flames. No sign of Dorothy, no blood, no struggle, nothing. For days, there was no word, no leads. Then the phone rang at the Scott residence. "I've got her," the voice said. The caller hung up, and just like that, the torment began. Over the next 4 years, the Scott family received countless phone calls from the same man. He always called during the day when Vera, Dorothy's mother, was alone. The messages were short, cryptic, and cruel. "Are you alone? Is Dorothy home? I've got her." The voice was calm, unshaken, confident. The calls became part of their lives. Random, haunting, and untraceable. The only time the caller broke pattern was when Jacob, Dorothy's father, answered the phone one night. The man hung up and never called in the evening again. It was as though he didn't want to risk a confrontation. He didn't want to be heard by a man. Despite tracing efforts, police were never able to catch him. The calls were too short. He never stayed on the line long enough. On August 6, 1984, construction workers found human remains in the hills of Anaheim, just a few miles from where Dorothy's car had been discovered. The bones were scorched, scattered, and partially buried. Alongside the remains were a dog and cat skeleton, placed eerily beside the body. Nearby were a turquoise ring and a wristwatch, stopped at 12:30 a.m. on May 29, 1980, the night Dorothy disappeared. Dental records confirmed what her parents feared. The remains belonged to Dorothy Jane Scott. The cause? Undetermined. The body was too decomposed. Too much time had passed. The discovery of Dorothy's body should have ended the calls, and for a while it did. But then one day, months after the remains were identified, the phone rang again. Vera answered. The voice said, "Is Dorothy home?" And then silence. Police focused their investigation on coworkers and acquaintances. There was one man in particular who had expressed romantic interest in Dorothy. She had reportedly rejected him. He was questioned and even took a polygraph test, but passed. With no physical evidence and no definitive suspects, the case stalled. Theory world. Was it a jilted lover? A coworker? A stalker who found Dorothy by chance? No one knows. To this day, the killer has never been identified. Theories and speculation over the years, investigators and armchair detectives have put forward dozens of theories. Some believe Dorothy's stalker was someone close, someone she trusted. The fact that she believed she knew who the caller was but refused to say suggests a complicated relationship. Perhaps she feared retaliation. Perhaps it was someone she felt she couldn't accuse without consequences. Others argue the killer was a complete stranger, predatory stalker who fixated on her from afar. Maybe he followed her home. Maybe he shopped at her store. Maybe he never even met her face to face. Another chilling theory is that the killer was a serial offender. One who practiced psychological torture as much as physical violence. The phone calls, the threats, the long silence, the precise ritualistic placement of animal bones beside her body. All of it suggests someone who derived power from control. And then there are those who think the killer wasn't acting alone. What if the man on the phone wasn't the same person who abducted her? What if someone helped cover it up? The truth may never be known. Dorothy's parents never recovered from her death. Her mother Vera lived in torment, answering the phone for years, hoping to hear her daughter's voice, only to be greeted by the same man. Her father Jacob died in 1994, still haunted by unanswered questions. Her son Sean grew up without his mother. He later gave interviews, still searching for peace, still hoping that someone somewhere would come forward. But no one ever did. Dorothy Jane Scott's story is more than a murder mystery. It's a case study in fear, in obsession, in how evil can hide behind the mask of ordinary life. It's a reminder that stalking isn't just a nuisance, it's a warning sign, a threat, a slow, creeping nightmare that can end in tragedy. To this day, her murder remains unsolved. Her case remains open, her story remains unfinished, and somewhere, the voice that once whispered threats through the telephone may still be out there. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, share it. Remember Dorothy, and remember, sometimes the scariest monsters don't hide in the dark, they call in the daylight.